Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Melissa Grant. I'm president of the Grassroots Democrats HQ. And let me introduce you to the rest of our leadership and staff if you don't already know them. First, we have Tamara Melzer-Levinson, our superb executive director. Then we have Brian Coker, who I don't think is with us this evening. He's our CFO. Davis Hahn, our campaign consultant. Mana Shushtari, our field director. Ingrid Van Eckert, our events coordinator. Eve Levinson, our national youth advisor. Barry Rosenbaum, our senior staff. Andy Linden, our recruitment coordinator. Robert Jimenez, our field organizer, one of them. Zenon Yuliat Crow, our other field organizer, and Pratt Malik, our amazing technology coordinator. So let's give a hand for all of them, okay? They are wonderful. All right, now I'm going to introduce you to the two women who lead our field program and our youth program. Without them, let's put it this way, the Grassroots Democrats HQ would not exist. And we are fortunate to have them as our panel, MCs for the evening. They are Mana Shushtari, our field director, and Eve Levinson, our national youth advisor since 2000, during which she also worked as an advisor for the Biden presidential campaign. And she spent 3 years working for gun violence prevention with the nonprofit March of Our Lives, overseeing the policy and advocacy work for their federal affairs, and then their policy and governmental affairs manager. Now, Mana started with us in 2020, and she started as a fellow. So anybody who's currently a fellow, the stars are your goal, because Mana is our star. She went from the field, from one of our, I just forgot the name, to our assistant field coordinator, to our field and communications coordinator, where she helped run all the field operations. And now she's our field director. She manages all the voter contact and makes sure everything works for the HQ. She's amazing. She's also a California delegate to this California Democratic Party. So I'm now going to turn it over to Mana and Eve, who will introduce our panelists. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will curate the questions and present them to the panelists for answers. Okay, thank you. Take it away, you two.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you. As Melissa said, my name's Eve. I use she, her pronouns. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about why the fight for reproductive freedom is so important, and really what's at stake in the election, and why electoral work is really crucial in this time period. I think in the last few weeks, especially as a young woman, I'm 22, I guess it's not weeks at this point, months, the realization that the rights that we for so long were told that not just women, but all people who are able to get pregnant, that we always thought we had and were protected by the Constitution, having the Supreme Court strip that away, has been really scary. And I know Mana and many other people that we know work with have really found solace in the ability to be able to both look to those people who have been doing this work for so long, like so many of the people who are on this panel, many of whom I'm lucky to be able to call my personal mentors, but also in this work, I know that I got to organize a protest outside of the Supreme Court with a lot of other Gen Z activists, and the work that we do here at the HQ, for me, and I know for many of you, has been rejuvenating during this tough time. But for that reason, I'm really excited for this panel today, and I'll hand it over to Mana if she wanted to add anything before we introduce our panelists.
Thanks so much, Eve. I mean, you said all of that so gracefully. I kind of just want to say ditto, but as a fellow young person, I just turned 22 last week. I too have found solace in the ability to organize and make sure that we are able to once again regain the right to our bodies. So I thank you all for joining us today.
Awesome. So with that, we'll go ahead and introduce our 4 panelists. So first, I'm excited to introduce Heather Booth, who I am lucky to call a mentor. Heather, for those of you who don't know, has been an incredible and powerful civil rights and women's rights activist and organizer for a long time. A fun fact about how Heather and I know each other is that before we met, actually, she knew my grandmother when they organized in college respectfully around the women's movement then. Heather has been involved in so many incredible fights, including having run a very successful underground abortion clinic, safely getting so many people who needed abortions before Roe v. Wade. She also has been a great ally for the Grassroots STEM HQ. We got to work with her when she was the director of Progressives and Seniors Outreach on the Biden-Harris campaign. And we're so thrilled to have you here today, Heather.
Of course, I love being here, both to be, I said before, I thought it was sort of the old gangs getting back together from Dem HQ, who helped to win this election and give Joe Biden 81 million votes, the most that anyone ever had, which shows that people are out there and want to make a change if we just organize. And also my great pleasure to be here with these remarkable panelists who I look forward to talking with and learning from. Thank you, Eve.
Thank you, Heather. I love the energy you bring. It is my pleasure to introduce Sandra Fluke, who is a public interest attorney, social justice advocate, and a board member for the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project, also known as WRRAP. She came to national attention when she testified before members of Congress regarding comprehensive insurance coverage for birth control, and also very courageously took on Rush Limbaugh and other conservative commentators during that fight. Thank you for joining us today, Sandra.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here with everyone. I'll say I use she, her pronouns, and also just want to say, the old commercial used to say, I'm not only the president, but I'm a member of, what was that, like the Men's Hair Club or something. I am not only a panelist of Grassroots Dems HQ, I am a volunteer with Grassroots Dems HQ. I have been out knocking on doors in Orange County and LA County the last few weekends and have been a volunteer for years with you all. So putting my money where my mouth is, and really glad that all of you are involved with this fantastic organization as well.
Awesome. And we have 2 more incredible panelists today. Emiliana Guereca has been leading so much of the work that's been happening in this sort of post-Women's March, post-Trump era. Emmy is the driving force behind all the women's marches that happened in Los Angeles over the last, I guess now 5 years. She has done incredible work just generally nationwide around the issues of elevating women. And I feel lucky enough to have been one of the young women that she helped to elevate and uplift back when I met her really in 2017. The Women's March Action has also been an incredible partner of the Grassroots STEM HQ in the voter outreach that we do, and especially at this intersection of how do we get out women voters and how do we make sure that the campaigns and electeds we're working for are listening to the issues that are important to women voters. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Emmy.
Thank you for having me. I'm like super excited to be here. Grassroots STEM HQ is a phenomenal partner, not just to Women's March Action, but honestly to the work across the country. So I'm thankful that you all are still doing all of this work. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us, Emmy. And last but most certainly not least, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Caroline Heldman, who is the Executive Director of the Representation Project and also the Chair of the Critical Theory and Social Justice Department at Occidental College in Los Angeles. Dr. Heldman has published 6 books, and she has also been active in real-world politics as a professional pollster, campaign manager, commentator for CNN International and Spectrum One. So thank you for joining us today, Dr. Heldman.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, and what a joy to be one of the panelists with Sandra Fluke and Emmy and Heather. I mean, this is just incredible. Thank you all so much for your work. I've run into, I think, all of you on the streets at various points at different protests, and we're certainly in a moment now, so it's just a joy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So first, you want to start off with a question for all of you. Whoever wants to jump in first can. So all 4 of you, either through political, or for most of you, multiple of them through political organizing, nonprofit work, policymaking, academia, which we know all go hand in hand together. Each of you have been deeply engaged for the struggle for reproductive rights and gender equity over the course of your careers. So can you each share your initial reactions to the Dobbs decision, either the leaked decision or when the decision itself was made, and what you believe must come next for us to be able to restore reproductive freedom in this country?
Well, I'll jump in and say, as I think I had reactions on several levels. As an individual, as a woman, as someone who worries about reproductive health care for myself personally and others I care about, it was just a devastating moment. I think it was for many of us. And I actually sort of felt surprised on how much it shook me to my core because, we had known this was coming. Those of us who are engaged didn't know that, but it really hit me in an emotional way. I will say on another level, as an attorney, I was stunned at how far the court went. This decision was tragically more far-reaching than we might have feared, and the language within it is so it's pulling from so far back and so damaging. So that was really shocking and upsetting. And I felt, as a board member for WRRAP, for the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project, where we're an abortion fund and help folks who can become pregnant to afford and access abortion, my mind quickly started shifting to, okay, how do we make this possible? How do we make sure that we are supporting individuals who are immediately impacted, that this isn't all about politics and policy, this is about real lives on a daily basis for folks.
I completely agree, and had, not surprisingly, a similar reaction to Sandra's, that this was outrageous, that people will be harmed, that lives will be threatened. And even our very position in the society will be threatened, because we're at a point where we are on this knife's edge between democracy and tyranny, where there's been a pushback on our freedoms and our rights that we've won and fought for over 50 years. And so this is the tragedy of the decision on Roe, when almost 80% of the country did not believe that Roe should be overturned, and almost about 80% of the country believe that a politician should not come between a woman and a physician on this most intimate decision of a person's life about when or whether or with whom we have a child. So on the one hand, it's also part of a whole bigger picture of the pushback on voting rights, on the lack of getting military artillery off the street, AK-47s, moving further on climate, and really this whole attack, a criminal conspiracy attack by the MAGA Republicans on our country as a whole and on democracy. And at the same time, there is this promise of even greater democracy, but only if we organize. So I went to where Sandra said she also went. They're trying to turn the anger into action, the protest into power, and say, well, what do we do about it? And I often talk about 4 M's. What we need now, and DemHQ is a central part of this, is we need members. We need to recruit people, recruit them for the phone bank, for the canvassing, for the phone calls, for the organizations, for the politics. We need message. Some of the words I just said about the most intimate decision in a person's life, about when or whether or with whom we have a child, that's part of the message we can send that's been tested and shown people can respond to that more likely. We need that message. Send it out by social media, by forums like this, by things you write, by, as Dr. Heldman does, she writes books and speeches that Sandra gives, or Emiliana. We need money. We need to raise the money. We are facing incredibly politicized, partisan funding on the other side. And we need movement. We need people to show up, as the Women's March does, as everyone on this call, on the panel does, and also with a final comment, as all of you do. There are now, I think there were at last count, 143 people on this call. And all of you are people who are activists, who you are the members, you give the message, you recruit the money, and you show up for the movement. So we're glad to be with you in this moment where we move that knife's edge from the tyranny to democracy, with 2 more votes in the Senate, holding the House, other political positions up and down the ballot, and we can change the future.
I'll jump in next. That's thank you, Heather. Rousing words. I come at this from probably a unique position, maybe on this call. I was raised Pentecostal evangelical. I went to protest outside abortion clinics on a regular basis as a child with Operation Rescue. And as I grew older and more educated, and realized that I was on the entire opposite end of the spectrum, I was very thankful when I went to get an abortion that I didn't have a little me standing outside of that clinic, making that choice even more painful or difficult as it was on that day. Not to say that that's what abortion is for everyone. It certainly is not, but I was very thankful I didn't run into a little me. I have watched this unfold. I think we all have, anyone who's been in the trenches for a long time. We have watched essentially a cultural Cold War develop where Republicans, one party, has gone in and rigged the rules of the game. So it started once Roe v. Wade was passed. The activist efforts shifted to the state level, and we started to see, and it wasn't just abortion, but that was a driving single voter, single focus issue, where we saw Republicans put a lot of money and a lot of effort, the American Legislative Exchange Council and other organizations, ramp up the state legislature and get disproportionate representation there, which they then used to gerrymander and rig the rules of the game, not just for the state legislature, but for the Congress. And so we have a Congress that does not accurately reflect the partisan makeup of the country, even voters in the country. We have state legislatures that do not reflect that. We now have, a Supreme Court that is wildly out of step with public opinion, not just on Roe v. Wade. And so I can't stress enough as a political scientist looking at this. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but elections have more importance now than they ever have, and especially elections at the state level. So if we want, I think this is a long-term strategy in terms of responding to the overturn of Roe. It's not the first fundamental right that's on the chopping block. It won't be the last. We're going to see a slew of that, and I know we'll discuss that in a bit. But at the end of the day, right now, the thing that we need to do the most of is reclaim our state legislatures so that we can reclaim our districting, so that we can reclaim our seats in Congress that rightfully belong to a party that doesn't want to overturn democracy.
Yes, I'm going to say preach to everyone. So I come from the angle of, I grew up in a conservative household. I'm one of 13 kids, and abortion isn't what you talked about, what you do, what should be accessible for women until you go through an abortion, that you have had to make that decision because of whatever's going on in your life. So for me, as a Latina woman growing up in a conservative household and being told how bad abortion is, until it happens to one of our sisters, until it happens to us, then it is when we change our mind, right? Growing up in a conservative household and saying, you know what? It should be the woman's choice. When your mom is 80 and then tells you it should be the woman's choice, not the Supreme Court, not the state legislator, not anyone else, is when we all need to listen. And when we talk about abortion, and talk about it as in healthcare, how do we care for women? should include abortion. And this is the conversation that we are currently having across the country with Latina women from Texas. We're having this conversation with women in Georgia because I don't know if most of you know this, but there is no Spanish word for miscarriage. There is no such thing. It is aborto. It is abortion. That is the word, plain and simple, should be decided by the woman. When the decision came down June 24th, I was in the middle of opening up my Women's March Action Hub because we were ready to take this fight state to state because we knew this would happen. We are currently calling, phone banking Kansas, Georgia, and Texas to make sure that women will decide 2022 election and 2024 because we can't go back. So thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing that. I think those feelings of fear and call to action, I know, are something that I'm sure a lot of us share. And I just want to say, I especially echo the almost surprised by how upset I was knowing that it was going to come down and sort of that visceral fear. But I think that's a reality that I think is especially true for so many of us who are young women and people who can get pregnant of reproductive age, knowing what sort of this world looks for us going forward. So I wanted to ask Heather specifically this next question. So as someone who organized for reproductive freedom in the pre-Roe era, and I'm hoping you can also, for those who don't know, speak a little about what you did with the Jane Collective. What are some historical lessons that you think can be applied to today's fight for reproductive freedom in this post-Roe era?
Let me give you a little description of the experiences that I had, first in the civil rights movement, and then with this underground service with Jane. I came into this social change work really through the civil rights movement. And I came in as a young teenager, maybe 14, 15. I'm now 76. I'll be 77 this year. By the way, one thing to say is you can have a life in the movement. I see Zed raises her hand, her finger, says she, her. So that whatever age, there is an important role. And especially now, we need a partnership across the generations as the next generation and the one after that needs to carry on these struggles. But I came in through the civil rights movement largely because I was following a moral concern. I just believe this isn't how people should be treated. And the civil rights movement had a vision of building a beloved society. And I think we need to organize with love at the center of what we do. In 1964, I went to Mississippi with the Freedom Summer Project, and many of you, probably most of you, have heard about it because it gained notoriety. Northern students were recruited to go down to support very courageous African Americans in Mississippi who were risking their lives and livelihoods in order to vote. And there was also a move at the same time to move a Voting Rights Act. But people were being killed and tortured, truly terrorized, probably by the inheritors of the same white supremacy terrorism that we're facing today. And the Summer Project gained notoriety when 3 of the young volunteers, Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, and Michael Schwerner, were killed at the hands of the Klan. Oh, I see someone says they also were down in Mississippi, and someone says she's also 76. So we're all part of the same broad movement. But though there was that terror, within a year, there was a Voting Rights Act. And people realized that it was worth that risk to gain freedom, and we did gain more freedom. And back in Chicago in 1965, I was a student. I returned there with those lessons from the Summer Project, that if we organize, we can change the world, but we need to follow our moral values. And sometimes we need to stand up to illegitimate authority. And a friend of mine told me his sister was pregnant, nearly suicidal, Could I provide help? I didn't know what to do. Like, I think it was Caroline who said, or Emiliana said, we didn't really talk about abortion. Or in 1965, we didn't really talk about sex to anyone who we weren't close to. And I said, I still would try and figure out what to do. I found a doctor through the network of civil rights physicians, Dr. TRM Howard. And the abortion was successful. Word spread. Someone else called, I set that up. Word spread, and I set up a system. There's longer parts to the story that's in a movie called The James, that's on HBO. And there's another movie with Sigourney Weaver coming out named Call Jane. That's a Hollywood version coming out in September. And the women of Jane, we called it Jane because 3 people performing an abortion in 1965 or talking about performing one would have been part of a conspiracy to commit a felony. So rather than saying, call my phone number, we said, call this number, pregnant, don't want to be, call Jane. The women I recruited into Jane themselves learned how to do the procedures and performed 11,000 abortions before Roe. And the key lessons that I've learned are, if we organize, we have changed this world and we will change this world, which is just what you're doing tonight. 2, you need to follow your moral convictions. We mostly know what's right to do. And 3, you sometimes have to stand up against illegitimate authority.
Thank you, Heather, for sharing those 3 very powerful lessons on organizing. And so for this next question, since we are on the topic of organizing and having conversations, this is a question for Emmy. Emmy, much of your work with Women's March Foundation and Women's March Action has been focused on mobilizing record numbers of people to vote, many of them who are voting for the first time. So when you're having these conversations, what is your response to someone who says, I voted in 2020 and gave Joe Biden and Democrats control of both the White House and Congress? Roe was overturned anyways. Why should I believe that my vote will matter this year?
Woo! Because if you think one election is going to save us, we got to have some more coffee with you. So part of it is that we've got to continue to organize, but also we've got to hold our politicians accountable, right? We've got to make sure that we talk through why we voted them in, but also look at your state, and local and state elections are way more important, as we all know now, going to the state legislators. But it's also about really protecting democracy involves more than you just showing up to vote. It involves you phone banking with Grassroots MHQ. It involves you canvassing with them with some of these candidates, right? It involves you being involved more than that one time to show up to vote, because then you know where these politicians stand, right? And as we are phone banking into Kansas and talking through vote no on August 2nd, most of these folks did not understand that it was a special election. They thought it was going to be in November, right? So it is really about having these conversations, but aside from that, getting involved. I mean, yes, in California, I'm in Los Angeles, we are protected. We are lucky to be in California, but it's also our duty to help our sisters that are across the country that are not. I'm currently in Boyle Heights. I can tell you that after the Supreme Court decision, we have folks coming through our door asking for a friend, asking for a family member, how they can get access to abortion for their family members, for their friends. We now have pamphlets. We now have a way for them to log in and look at what stage they are in. We are talking about Los Angeles and Boyle Heights. If folks just want to stop in, yes, there are laws and we're a sanctuary state, but not everyone knows how to access that. And so again, looking at our local elections, looking at our state elections, and really bringing that fight to the state. Because as we know, the Supreme Court's not going to save us. The president can't save us. It's up to us to do that. So you're going to continue voting. We're going to continue fighting together. But one election will not fix all of the issues that are currently will be on the ballot. So rinse, repeat, we got to come back.
Thank you, Emmy. Before I ask the next question, I just want to add on to that. I think I work with a lot of young people, and I hear that a lot all the time, especially because I think when your perspective on history, it's different when you're younger. We're used to just the last sort of few years, and we have four generations, I'm pretty sure, represented on this panel. Like, that comes with a different perspective. And so I know that's something that I face a lot when I'm also talking to other Gen Zers and young millennials. And I think another thing that I like to do is also highlight what have Democrats done that if we had a few more seats, we would be able to do. We know that the House of Representatives passed the Women's Health Protection Act before this decision. They just passed it again, that would enshrine Roe v. Wade into law. They passed legislation to protect the right to travel so that you can go across state lines if you need to. They passed legislation that would enshrine marriage equality because that was also included in the Dobbs decision, both for interracial and same-sex couples. And the reality is that we know most of this won't pass the Senate, but why is that? Because we need a few more votes in the Senate. And so I think that, in addition to everything Emmy said, I would just say that's something I do when I'm talking to people. And I would hope that when you all are doing it, encouraging your friends to volunteer to vote, that you also can point to what has been done when we do have the margins we need in one chamber of the federal government, and what that's a signal of what could happen. So I then want to ask the next question to Sandra specifically. So Sandra, you first came to national attention 10 years ago when you testified before Congress, as Mana mentioned in your introduction. But despite tremendous efforts of so many activists and organizers like yourself, we have failed to pass legislation to guarantee this basic right to reproductive health care. What do you believe needs to happen for us to finally succeed?
Yeah, thank you, Eve. So I think there's a couple of things. First of all, we need to make sure we understand that while we are not there yet, we have had a lot of successes. We have to remember that. Many of us may remember the Casey decision in the early 90s, when a lot of legal prognosticators thought that Roe v. Wade was going down at that point. I can't remember how many decades past the 90s we are now. What is that, 30 years? So there has been time again and again over these decades when we have fought and we have won. And while it feels like a very hard period right now, and it is a hard period right now, this is not that all of those efforts weren't worth it or weren't successful. It just means we're in a new stage in this fight. And if we can try to find the energy we need for this moment, I hope that some of that will come from, okay, we're no longer on defense. It's offense time. It's time to understand really clearly what all of us are fighting for. And for too long, it has been the case that the right to abortion existed on paper, but it was not the reality for so many women in so many economic conditions, particularly for women of color, for low-income women, for women in rural communities, for a lot of LGBTQIA plus folks who can become pregnant who don't identify as women. So now is the time when we all come together and we build something stronger than what we had before, because Roe is the floor, not the ceiling. So this isn't just about getting back to the protections that we had constitutionally, nationally. This is about achieving true reproductive justice, rights that are real in our lives, not just on paper. And so this is a moment where we can talk about this as day one of where we build to next. So yes, we have to have some of our first steps in that. We have got to organize around this election. We've got to put 2 more pro-choice, pro-filibuster reform senators in office, and we have to hold on to the House majorities who have been willing to pass not only the Women's Health Protection Act that codifies Roe and expands Roe, but the EACH Act, which overturns Hyde, which had prevented many low-income women from getting access to abortion, the contraception protection bill, as well as the marriage equality bills that are now being debated, because we know that Justice Thomas is trying to take down all of our substantive due process rights. That's not just about abortion access, that's about intimacy, privacy for same-sex couples, a lot of protections for all of us together. So this election is absolutely key, not only because of the number of seats we can pick up and what that will mean, but because this election sends a message. Allow me just a moment to remind all of us of what happened in the 90s when gun safety legislation was passed and the NRA, the National Rifle Association, declared war on all of the congressional incumbents who had voted for that. For decades since then, it has been a truism in DC that you couldn't pass gun safety legislation because the NRA was so politically powerful that they would take out any Republican who did that. Let us send that kind of message in this election. Let it be known that you will not mess with reproductive rights because you will pay the cost. And if we fail to send that message in this election, this fight will be so much longer and so much harder. So this is the moment.
Sandra, thank you. And I do echo your concerns about how Roe won't be the first to go if we don't fight back now. And I think that serves as an excellent segue into the question that we have for Dr. Heldman, who has studied and published extensively on the rights and political power of groups who have been historically marginalized in American politics. Should we be worried that Dobbs will be the first of many more rulings by this court infringing on the rights of women and folks who can't get pregnant, BIPOC communities, and the LGBTQ+ community? And if so, what can we do to fight back?
I think it's interesting that we didn't need, thank you for the great question, by the way, Manna. We didn't need Clarence Thomas's opinion to tell us that other basic rights are on the chopping block, right? And the way in which the court is doing this is to turn the decision back to the states. And as you know, 13 states had trigger laws immediately for Roe. So what I anticipate, and I love the let's go, let's fight. I don't think we've hit bottom yet. We've got a couple of scenarios in front of us that will make this worse. One is a little bit of a silver lining here. I actually think there might be a chance that the same-sex protection, same-sex marriage protection and interracial marriage protection that is passed in the House might actually pass in the Senate. There was a surprising number of 47 Republicans voting for it because the party didn't whip, because meaning that they didn't go in and tell them how to vote, because there are people who really need to not be seen as extreme as I think the Republicans have overplayed their hand with Roe. And so one, again, a silver lining is that we might actually get interracial marriage and same-sex marriage enshrined in national law. With that said, this election is going to be difficult for Democrats when you have a Republican president, when you have a Democratic president that has an approval rating below 50%, or actually of whatever party, but a Democrat in this case. The swing is about 35 seats in the House in a typical election. That's not to say this is a typical election. I really do think that there's a bit of overplaying of the hand. We talk about the fact that 85% of Americans oppose what a lot of states are putting in, which is abortion without exceptions for anything, right? For rape, incest, et cetera. I mean, it's a very extreme position. So I think we have a very difficult race election in front of us, many races. If it goes poorly, we will see national legislation to overturn Roe in all 50 states. We just will. We will also, even before then, and we're seeing these efforts already, we're going to see overturning access to contraception, which of course is a fundamentally illogical position. If you want to reduce it, if you say you want to reduce abortions, then contraception would be the primary way to do that in good sex ed, which means that if you oppose both abortion and contraception, then you're disingenuous and you really just want to control the bodies of people who can get pregnant, right? That's your goal. And it's been fascinating watching on social media a lot of young people, like young conservatives, discovering how much one of the political parties, essentially hates women. Wow, you're against contraception and abortion? Doesn't make sense. So that's happening next. So we'll probably also see some sodomy laws being kicked up again, I would imagine. And I wouldn't even be surprised if, even if we enshrine same-sex marriage at a federal level, that we see some states pushing back against that, and then it works its way up to the court. What is the court right now? It is a minority rule theocracy. How did we get here? Well, there was once again, the rules of the game were rigged, right? If we look back at Merrick Garland, that was a turning point where, historians, political scientists, and Democratic activists, or people who love democracy, were pulling our hair out because we saw what was happening, right? It was a dangle for Pentecostal evangelicals. When Scalia died, a lot of Pentecostal evangelicals were not supportive of Donald Trump. The party held that seat. Mitch McConnell held that seat so that he could get Donald Trump elected in pulpits across the country. I'm very, still well connected. Maybe Emiliana, you are as well in your conservative circles. They were openly saying it from the pulpit. Just, hold your nose, vote for Donald Trump. He's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. And they couldn't have planned it better. I mean, I think it was actually maybe a bit of a surprise. All of this to say that I think the next couple of elections are going to be super rough. I think it's a longer term game where we regain the democracy. We reinstate the rules of democracy at the state level. I think it's going to be a while before we reinstate democracy at a federal level, meaning a Congress that represents the demographics of the nation, and a court that represents the majority opinion. And I know this sounds really pessimistic, but so my take is that for 50 years, I think we've been a little head in the sand about what was going to happen. And not all of us, obviously, but I think naming the problem and realizing how deep that problem runs is the first step in actually addressing it. And I'll just end by saying, a lot of commentators are saying, oh, it's going to be the economy, abortion is just another issue. It is not another issue. If you talk to women, even women who might be, against abortions, the idea that women's bodies are not our own, we don't get to make these decisions. I've been in a lot of Republican groups lately where Republican women are uneasy about this, certainly Democratic women. It's fundamentally about our place in society and our value in society. So I think that the Republicans have overplayed their hand. They've underestimated what this means to people. And I'm hoping that we see that massive swing come November.
Thank you so much, Caroline. We're going to have one more question that's open to you, but I did just want to build off of one thing Caroline said, which is about this being an important issue. And I think we've seen the polls that show how important this is to people. But I also think that when we're targeting voters, it's important to make messaging specific to them. I know this is something that anybody who's ever been to meet with me, I probably sound like a broken record, but when you look at young people, the same messaging and the same issues aren't going to work. And I will say that when you look at the issue of abortion specifically, and young people across ideological lines, across partisan lines, across gender identities, we are overwhelmingly for reproductive rights, and even larger numbers than older generations. And so I think it's also about what messaging are you using for what people. And the reality is, I think for pretty much everybody, at least I personally think Democrats are going to make it better, but we have to figure out what are we highlighting that. And do you want to know what's going to be the most important, I think the most important issue for somebody that's like me, that's like Mana, that is a young person, that is of reproductive age, that this decision extremely affects? Of course, this is going to be what's going to turn us out. And that's not just true for those of us that I think are already politically active. So on that note, and because we are the Grassroots STEM HQ and we work on electoral work, I did just want to open up to all our panelists. We know that historically, people say that the party of the president almost always loses midterm elections, and people are very doom and gloom right now when it comes to things like some of the economic numbers, they've been improving some recently, that people are really concerned. However, as I've just touched on a little bit, I know Caroline also touched on, we know that since the Dobbs decision was handed down, we've seen some of the polls change on this, and especially seeing sort of that uptick in volunteer interest and all of that. So how do you think this issue will impact the election? And also, why do you think this issue is important for the election? So both sides do that.
I actually think when I said that we were on a knife's edge, democracy or tyranny, I think that we can have an option to make this an even more small d, as well as large d, democratic future. It is true we are facing enormous headwinds, but we also have enormous opportunity depending on what we do. First of all, an election is not just, do you like how things are? The answer is no. There's inflation, there's COVID, there's a war, there's hatred, there's threats to democracy. But it's about a choice of real candidates. Our real candidates are so different. Reverend Warnock in Georgia got a moral candidate versus someone, he is up against someone who I don't even think he understands when he's telling a lie. For Herschel Walker, you know, he says you have to take care of children, even children out of wedlock, and then 2 children show up and say, by the way, we're your children, you don't pay any attention, you never acknowledged us even. He says he graduated at the top of his class. He didn't even graduate. So that it's just one after another. Fetterman in Pennsylvania, you know, who has the dates by which people had been killed when he was mayor by gunfire, to say that this is one of the things, this is how deeply he feels about it, against Dr. Oz, who lives in New Jersey probably, and a governor's candidate, Mastriano, who himself was part of the January 6th insurrection, and the list goes on. So it's a real choice. That's one reason why we will drive ahead and have a real option. The second is that there has been an enormous boost of response, in part because of this overturning of Roe. 78% of Democrats say they are more likely to vote because of the Supreme Court decision. Only 20% of Republicans say that. And the whole territory is starting to shift. Even redistricting, which was mentioned before, redistricting, because people fought on it, 538, that political website that's often quite reliable and trustworthy, says that we are 6 seats better in pro-democratic seats in the House than we were before the redistricting, even though it was biased and corrupted in many states and Republican MAGA controlled in many states. So this decision, along with other issues, including we may, by the way, pass a reconciliation bill, and we need to applaud that reconciliation bill, though it doesn't have everything we were hoping for, previously called Build Back Better, if in fact it allows Medicare to negotiate on prescription drug prices and lowers the price of many medications and reduces inflation with that, as well as expands to some of the, continues the work that was done on expanding medical coverage with the Affordable Care Act. So there are many reasons that there are opportunities. This decision is one key one, and it all depends on what we do.
That's right. I agree with Heather. You know, I think this decision is the kindling, and it's up to us whether we're going to light a fire or not. It's up to the people who are on this call. You know, I used to make electoral predictions that were all about the numbers and the polling. I was actually asked by a reporter at one point, do you think Democrats are going to take back the House? And I laughed and said, no, I can do math, which was not a great idea to say on the record to a reporter. But the reason I share it with all of you is that I said that before the 2018 cycle, and we had, as Heather was saying, terrible maps back then. So the maps and the numbers are not destiny. It is about what all of us do. That is what creates the outcome. So if we see the kinds of volunteerism numbers, the amount of activism that we saw in the 18 cycle, we will be able to hold the House and we will be able to expand the Senate. And if we don't see that kind of outpouring of energy, then we won't. So I don't have a better answer to this question than all of you do, because the answer is are we going to do it or not? And each one of us has to answer that question. So I'm out there, I'm doing it, I'm knocking on doors, I'm doing the postcards, doing everything that I can. And if all of you will take that same commitment, make that commitment, bring along the friends, find the people who volunteered during that 18 cycle and say, remember what we accomplished? I know it's been a really hard few years since then. I know we're really exhausted. There is too much on the line right now. We have to do this right now.
I think that we have to look at messaging. We have to really, truly look at what is, how we speak to voters, how we engage voters in California is very different from how you engage them in Georgia and in Kansas and in Texas. And so we are, this big tent. And so we need to make sure that we have inclusive language. We need to make sure that we are reaching out to those that are affected the most. I mean, when we, knock on doors, phone bank and whatnot, have that messaging, because not everyone, I truly believe that not everyone is going to vote on the Roe v. Wade issue, but they will vote on other issues that will affect them. When you talk about Roe v. Wade, we talk about healthcare for women. We talk about access. You don't want an abortion? Don't get one. But there has to be choice for women. So talking through truly to these voters of what's at stake, registering voters, my goodness, during the pandemic, over 9 million folks have moved. They may not even be ready to vote. So I think there's the messaging piece for our part in Women's March Action. We do make sure that when we talk to voters, that we are using language that is inclusive for them. For example, my sister in Illinois is like, what the heck is a Latinx? I'm Hispanic. Ooh, all right. Let's work on that. So I think that that's part of it. I think that some of us believe that this is just what needs to be used all across the board. And we have a messaging problem. We truly do. Because if we think that we are just mobilizing voters on Roe v. Wade, we are going to be mistaken. We've got to talk about all of the issues that come when they dismantle women's rights. When they take away a woman's choice, that means that these rights are going to come after. That means that civil liberties are at stake, and we need to speak to voters about that, because not every voter is really in tune with what Roe v. Wade means for them, for their family, for their community, but they'll understand that they may lose civil liberties. They will understand that their state legislator now gets to choose for them, right? So I think that that's the issue that we need to make sure it's front and center coming into November. Messaging, messaging, messaging.
I couldn't agree with you more, Emiliana. I'll build on that to say that if we look at what happened with abortion rights being instated in Ireland and in Argentina, both countries with high rates of religious populations that would typically stand against abortion and did for many decades, it was a very intense messaging campaign about the worth of women and folks who can get pregnant, right? It was very specifically a messaging campaign to humanize marginalized people and to make them matter more in this debate. I think what we'll see in the next couple of years is the country sorting, and we're already seeing this, but sorting into states that are hostile to rights and states that are sanctuary states or protective of rights. And we will, we're already seeing, we'll get good data on this soon, but we're already seeing college seniors making decisions about where to go to college based on this. We're going to see corporate headquarters relocating. We're going to see human beings migrating, those who have the resources to do so. And of course, poor folks aren't going to be that mobile. So some may be stuck in states where their rights are inhibited. We're going to sort into two Americas. And, you know, to build on what Heather and Sandra said, Sandra said, goodness, we don't know what's going to happen. When I said earlier that the Republicans have probably overplayed their hand, we've never been here before, right? We haven't been in a place where this is the very first time in the history of the court that we've rolled back a fundamental right. We've chipped away at, we've narrowed, we've expanded, but we've never actually rolled back. It's a new category that they have to, folks who teach public law and teach in law schools now have to add this distinct category, right? We haven't been here. And I would say that I think a lot of leaders, including those on the court and Republicans, prominent Republicans, should be worried because they have no idea, nor do we, how much rage has actually been generated with a ruling that tells you that you are not fully human. And so we don't know what will happen. And I love the energy behind harnessing it. Now is that moment. So let's see what we do with this moment.
Thank you all so much, plus to everything you all said. We now want to turn it over to Tamara Melzer-Levinson to share a little bit about what are the specific steps you can take to get involved to do what all of these people are saying.
First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Davis Hahn, our campaign consultant, who at one time was our field director, and we're very happy that he's still on board with us, to let you know about the races that the Grassroots Democrats HQ is currently supporting. Then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in each one of them. And first, I do want to say what this panel just did today was to re-emphasize, to re-energize even me, who's tired all the time from this work. But we have no choice but to activate. And these are the states that we need to get a focus on. Go ahead, Davis.
Thank you, Tamara. And I just want to say thank you again to all of our incredible panelists for joining us today, lending your words of wisdom and your words of inspiration. I think we all need some extra inspiration these days. And thank you to our incredible moderators and to women who I am very lucky to call colleagues, Eve and Mana. As Tamara mentioned, I'll be really brief here. I'm Davis Hahn, Grassroots Democrats HQ's consultant. I just want to briefly go over the races that we are targeting and why these races are important if you care about protecting reproductive rights at the federal level. So as you've heard alluded to multiple times tonight, if we hope to codify Roe v. Wade's protections at the federal level, we currently don't have the votes to do it in the Senate because of something called the filibuster. And we don't have support among all 50 Democrats right now to abolish the filibuster. We need at least, preferably more, but at least 2 Senate seats to net an additional 2 Senate seats in this fall's election to even have a chance at doing that in the next congressional calendar year. So we are targeting the 6 most competitive seats across the country. 3 of them are currently held by Democrats. They're seats that we need to hold on to and make sure that we keep blue this November. And the other 3 seats are seats that we're hoping to flip. So by working on at least 3 seats that we think are flippable, if God forbid we lose one of the ones that we're defending, we can hopefully pick up 3 and still get that +2 that we need to get rid of the filibuster. Those seats are Mark Kelly in Arizona. His election in 2020 was actually a special election, so that's why he's up again this year for a full 6-year term. Raphael Warnock, same thing for him in Georgia, his election in that runoff that we all remember in January of 2021 that we all worked so hard on. That's what gave Democrats the trifecta control of government. He is also up for a full 6-year term running against Herschel Walker, who Heather alluded to either. Catherine Cortez Masto is another Democratic incumbent who is running in Nevada. This is a seat that I think is not getting enough attention from a lot of strategists and pundits and activists across the country. Nevada is a state that, even though it has voted for the Democratic presidential candidate in each of the last 4 presidential elections, it has slowly but surely been trending more Republican, and the polling that has come out in that state actually shows a very, very tight race between Senator Cortez Masto and her Republican opponent. So that's a state that I think we need to spend a lot of energy on to keep it blue between now and November. And then there are 3 seats where we have an opportunity to add to our majority and flip a current Republican seat. You have North Carolina. This is obviously always a swing state in every election. This is a state where Democrats actually have a 6% voter registration advantage statewide, but we have underperformed in recent elections. That being said, it's an open seat. Senator Richard Burr is retiring and not running for re-election. So there's no incumbency advantage for the Republicans there. Cherry Beasley is the former Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court, a very strong candidate who we're supporting and we feel has a good shot to flip that seat in November. And then a race that's gotten a lot of national attention, the Pennsylvania Senate race, Senator Pat Toomey, also retiring Republican senator, so no incumbency advantage again for Republicans. You have a popular lieutenant governor in John Fetterman, who is the Democratic candidate, running, of course, against the infamous Dr. Oz, who only seemingly very recently found an address to register with in Pennsylvania so he could run for this seat. And then Wisconsin is the other state that we're targeting that we think we could flip a Republican seat blue. Their primary has not happened yet. We don't know who the Democratic candidate is going to be. The front runner is Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, but of course anything could happen. But we do know that Senator Ron Johnson, who is one of the most right-wing extreme members of the Senate in the Republican caucus, constantly spreading QAnon conspiracy theories. He's called the January 6th rioters who attacked the Capitol a bunch of tourists. He is running for re-election, and we are hoping that these extreme positions that he has taken is not going to sit well in a state that did, albeit narrowly, voted for Joe Biden in 2020. And there is a Democratic governor, Tony Evers, who's very popular, who's running for re-election there as well. And that could help bolster the Democratic ticket down ballot. Of course, we know that we can gain 2 Senate seats and get rid of the filibuster, and it won't mean anything if we do not hold on to our House majority. We are targeting 9 districts here in California. Several of these we're defending. That would be Josh Harder up in CA9. These are all, of course, new districts, so you might not recognize the numbers because these are new districts as a result of redistricting, but we're defending seats in CA9 and CA13. CA13 is a seat where Jerry McNerney, current Democratic congressman, is not running for re-election, but Adam Gray is a member of the state assembly who stepped in to run. And then in CA47 and 49 for Katie Porter and Mike Levin. We also have several seats that we're trying to flip here in California as well. Rudy Salas, a member of the assembly, is running against Republican incumbent David Valadeo in CA22. Asif Mahmood is running against Representative Young Kim in CA40. Jay Chen is running against Michelle Steele in CA45 in Orange County, and Will Rollins is running against Ken Calvert in CA41. One quick note I will add before I toss it back to Tamara, why the heavy focus on California. We are one of the only states where we actually have multiple seats that are competitive, where we could flip a Republican seat from red to blue and not just defend our majority, but actually expand on it. And in addition to that, and part of the reason that that is true is because everyone gets a ballot here in California in the mail. Now, we now have universal vote by mail, which means it's much easier for us as organizers to go out and mobilize voters and get them to vote, voters who might not traditionally turn out in a midterm election, when they already have that ballot sitting on their kitchen table and they don't have to go into a polling place to return it. We can phone bank or knock on their door and say, hey, can you go fill out that ballot and just put it in the mailbox and then you're done? It takes all of 2 or 3 minutes. So of course, there are plenty of other important congressional races around the country, and we're monitoring those as well if there are opportunities for us to make a difference. But those are our main targets: to pick up those 2 seats in the Senate at least, and then of course defend and hopefully expand our House majority as well. So I'm now going to toss it back to Tamara, who's going to talk about some of the ways that you can get involved now to make a difference in these races and ensure that we are successful in November.
Thank you so much for that. Everybody, I want you to take a deep breath for 1 second, because that was a lot of information on issues that we care about. It was also a tremendous amount of information on all the different races that we can make a difference in. I want you to take note of the fact that this was on purpose, not by accident, that the people that were leading, that were leading today's happy hour were young adult leaders and staff of the Grassroots Democrats HQ. So take a moment, put in the chat a huge thank you to them as well. They thought this out. Everything that we're doing right now when it comes to reproductive rights is not for people like me and those of you in the group that are of my age. It is for people that are younger than me. It is for the next generation. And if anybody out there ever says that the next generation is not active enough, come and look at the Grassroots Democrats HQ, and you will see that we have put the leadership in place and we have young adult programming. So how can you make a difference? First, you can help elect pro-choice senators in key Senate states. We need 2, only 2 more. We have to hold on to what we have, gain 2 more, and we will make history. We already have phone banking in 4 of those states, so please join us. And we're going to keep putting into the chat over and over again, so you cannot miss it, a link tree that has the ability for you to be signing up to be phone banking into Arizona, into Nevada, into Wisconsin, and we are partnering with the Women's Caucus of California to be doing a Mastos Monday. Don't worry, you're wondering, but wait, Tamara, they talked about 6 different states. We already have postcarding as well into all of our different states, and we will have phone banking in all 6 of our states within the next 2 weeks, I believe. So there's no shortage of activity to be working in these states for the Senate. Going on to our next slide, I'm going to talk about the opportunities that we have for working on congressional elections. As Davis said, the road to holding the House runs right through California. The Grassroots Democrats HQ leadership started in 2018 when we first flipped 7 congressional districts here in California. We were working with Women's March Action back then to be running buses and vans locally here in California. We were running phone banks. We started doing postcarding then and texting programs as well. We are continuing those partnerships and have moved on to be working in the Senate. So already you can be phone banking in all of our different states, in all of our different congressional districts. You can be writing postcards. Postcarding, I will tell you, is a wonderful entryway into electoral work. And we have postcards that also focus in the AAPI community. We have a Latino constituency organizer, Robert Jimenez, who is going into our Southern California districts and bringing volunteers with him to go and meet locally with communities, in Latino communities, to talk about the importance of the election, to knock on doors, and to be doing phone banking in language. We are doing Spanish phone banking not only for the California congressional elections, but also for our key Senate states. What else can you be doing with us? So I just talked about canvassing, phone banking, postcard writing, and when we have texting available, we also do that. When we are done with this happy hour, we will be sending you opportunities for volunteering. But please take it out of the chat. If you can, sign up for 3 events tonight. Why not? Because inactivity, what we know will happen if we are not, will actually lose. What we also know is that we have to do it together. We cannot do it alone. The Grassroots Democrats HQ has over 90 affiliates. If you are part of any group out there that wants to be lifted up, let us know. And we'll be working with the partners that you've already met in the room today. So watch out for more opportunities. Moving on from this slide. What else do I need to tell you about? The truth is, it takes funding. We have incredible programs that we are doing. We are uplifting as well young adult programming. There is what we call a volunteer deficit out there because people are tired. Even though we're asking you to be phone banking, canvassing, writing postcards, and texting, we're not getting enough people out there. So the Grassroots Democrats HQ is uplifting young adult programming as well. We have a fellowship program for over 30 students, but what we also did is we started a paid program of training for young adults across the country. Eve Levinson has been taking the lead on that training program, and we are making 5,000 phone calls a week using the young adult students that have come into our program. They get trained every week for 1 hour, and they give 5 hours of phone banking power into these congressional and Senate states. We also have a canvassing program where we are paying students of college age or college age individuals, because not everybody may be a student currently, and they are going and door knocking and canvassing. All of this takes funding. So let me tell you about a couple of funding opportunities. One is we're only 2 days away from a virtual happy hour. So I already have my glass of wine because it is a happy hour. Everybody take a sip because I'm going to ask you for one more thing. I'm going to ask you to donate tonight. If you would like to join us in the virtual happy hour, Representative Jamie Raskin will be with us on Thursday. As the committee now finishes its work and prepares to make legal recommendations to the Department of Justice, we're sitting down with one of the members of the January 6th Commission. Representative Raskin is going to give us an exclusive conversation about the committee's findings and why holding the House majority is so imperative for fighting for democracy. We're hoping that you will join us. So we're going to put in the chat right now that RSVP link. What I want to ask you to do is to use the power that you have to not only sign up and make a donation tonight, but to put it into all of your social media and asking them to come. It doesn't matter where you live because it is virtual. Let's say you can't come on Thursday. I get it. We're telling you about it today, and you may already have an activity. So we're also going to be putting a link into the chat, which is our Fight for Reproductive Rights link. Monica, can you change, or Davis, can you change the screen? We want you to be taking the power of what you just saw and help us to make our goal. It's not going to happen tonight, we know it, but you're going to help us to start it. And we have a goal of $10,730 for the Fight for Reproductive Rights. That is going to help us make it between now and the November election. I'm going to be honest, everybody. We don't have the money in the bank right now to finish the work that we're doing. We do not have the money in the bank right now to be paying for the operation that you see us doing and to be bringing on all of those amazing youth organizers that I was talking about. So what I want to tell you is that every dollar you donate in iterations of 73, the reason we're doing 73 is that Roe v. Wade was established in 1973. These funds are going to be directly used to be flipping and holding on to Senate and House seats. We need to flip at least 2 Senate seats and defend our House majority in November so that we can abolish the filibuster and codify reproductive rights. I personally was so inspired by the young adults that were here tonight. And trust me, I keep donating. I have to keep putting my credit card in my pocket sometimes, but I'm going to challenge all of you. I personally am going to donate tonight if you will come out and match me. I need to get the first $573 to go into this fund. It can be into this fund, or you can be donating and joining our happy hour. But when I hit that first $573, and I hope I'm going to hit $5,073 by anybody in this room who will help, I'm going to donate it back. And my funds are going to be going to make sure that we are uplifting the next cohort of young adults that will be working with us in the fall. I want to thank all of you, and if you can take the spotlight off of me so that everybody can actually see each other. I want you guys all to take a moment and think about what you just heard tonight. I want you to take a moment and figure out, how are you going to volunteer? What are you going to do? I want you to take a moment and click the buttons that are in the chat and donate as much as you can. Save it, put it into your social media. get 3 friends to volunteer, get 3 friends to donate. And I want to toast the fact that we had the most incredible panel that inspired me. I had not planned to donate tonight, but I decided I had to do it because activation, doing the work, and putting our funds where we need it to be is what truly matters. So please raise your glasses, a cup of coffee, whatever you have, and please thank Heather, Carolyn. Oh God, I'm sorry. I'm really tired right now. It has been a long day. Emmy, and
Sandra.
And Sandra. Guys, it has been a very long day. And thank them for coming and taking their time. Sandra, Emmy, Heather, and Carolyn, you literally spoke tonight in ways that inspired me. You are the leaders of what we all need to join the pack for, and you've all been doing it far longer than many of us in the room. And it is our job now to make sure that we abolish the filibuster, codify reproductive freedoms, and thank all of those who helped tonight. Eve, Mana, Davis, Melissa, Brian, and the leadership of the Grassroots Democrats HQ. Thank all of you for everything that you do. Have a good evening.
And before we leave, can we take a photo? If everyone could turn on their cameras, we love a good group shot here at the HQ. We tell people we take photos because we want to create FOMO, fear of missing out. So when tomorrow you see all of our posts on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, you can repost and say, hey, I got to watch this incredibly informative panel on the fight for reproductive rights. And I signed up to volunteer, and maybe I also donated. So everybody hold up your glasses so we can take a group picture. Ready? 1, 2, 3. And you have so many people. I have to go to the next screen. Keep holding up your cups and smiling. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. All right, Tamara, I'll kick it back to you.
Although this is the end of the happy hour, some of us from the HQ leadership are going to stay on for another 15 minutes to answer any other questions that people may have about volunteering, getting involved, whatever you want to do. We don't want you to think that you need to stay on for this right now, but I do want to make sure that those of you who had any lasting questions, wanted to say anything more, we're going to stay on for another 15 minutes just to give you that opportunity. Thank you again, Sandra, Carolyn, Heather, and Emmy, for what you did tonight. Thank you for sharing yourselves with us.